From the banks of Dewey Lake, it's the Dewey Pod Monster.
Welcome back. My name is John, and this is the Dewey Pod Monster podcast. This is the original podcast about consumption. We are proud members of the You Run Podcast Network. You check out all the other shows on the You Run Podcast Network at yourunpodcast.com. With me this week is the host of the Dewey Pod Monster podcast, and his name is Sean. And Sean, how the hell are you doing today?
You are getting astoundingly good at doing that intro. I am really impressed.
I still have brain farts with it, but we did like 100 episodes or so without it, and now we're it's probably 20-ish episodes in since we've had it. It's starting to become more routine.
You sound good. You're doing a hell of a job. You don't get enough kudos.
That's what I'm here for.
And I want to tell you, I'm proud of you. I got a real problem with telling people I'm proud of them. I want to let you know.
Those kudos bars that they had?
Yeah, kudos granola snacks.
Yeah.
Hell yeah,
those are good. How you been doing, Sean? What have you been up to this week?
I've been amazing. I'm doing...
Yeah?
Yeah, it's convincing, right? I'm doing one meal a day. Been doing it for a week. I don't know why. Just doing it. Doing it to do it. Gotta have something to do.
Lazy? Don't feel like making 2 meals?
No, I get hungry. I just don't.
Oh, okay.
Saving time. Sleep. I'm still only sleeping 20 minutes at a time, too.
You have some interesting tactics here. Can I subscribe to your newsletter?
Sure. You want to know what I've been watching now?
What have you been watching?
It has been almost exclusively Wrestler Corner for me last week.
Okay. So can we talk about Razor Ramon? Because I saved that for this week since you said you hadn't watched it yet.
I'll get to it.
Okay.
But what I wanted to say is my YouTube front page, that all the stuff that shows up is so screwed up right now. Like I was watching for a long time, I was watching camera stuff. So it would be all, camera gear or equipment or cameras or lenses or whatever. That was what it was for a long time.
Spy cams.
Now it's like street fights and wrestling documentaries and stuff. And still once in a while, the camera thing. Still lots of street fights, and
you got to have something to record the street fight on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You got to be out there in the field recording your own backyard wrestling events. So other than that, before I jump into wrestling, I watched a documentary. It came out, I believe, in 2021 called The United States of Insanity, which is a documentary, and I think I watched it on Amazon Prime. It's a documentary about ICP and their fight to remove the classification of juggalos as a gang in the eyes of the FBI. They go into the history of ICP, the Inner City Posse, aka the Insane Clown Posse.
So what it stands? Oh,
yeah. Well, that's what it used to be. And they interview Violent J's mom, and Shaggy Two Dope obviously is in it. Violent J's in it. It was really interesting. I don't consider myself a juggalo or a fan of juggalos or an ICP fan necessarily, but it was a pretty interesting documentary. You got to give those guys some credit for doing it their way. Is her name
Violent Julie?
The mom?
Yeah, Violent Julie, or maybe Violent Jane, or...
She didn't have a juggalo name.
Oh, that's disappointing.
She was just a regular name. I don't remember what it was.
Mama Jugs?
Yeah, maybe. Jug Mom. So, before we get into Razor Ramon, I watched the latest episode of Dark Side of the Ring, which I love Dark Side of the Ring. Buff Bagwell. I think it's actually called Buff and the Bagwells. Are you familiar with Buff Bagwell? Marcus Alexander Bagwell?
I don't think so.
He was an NWO kind of side dude, like when NWO started. I was a bigger WCW fan than I was WWE at the time for whatever reason. I think WWE still carried that stigma for me, even though it was the Attitude Era, carried that stigma for me, like that fucking gobbler thing that wrestled WrestleMania, whatever.
Talking about this guy in the fucking New Year's Eve hat that says Buff.
Oh, that's Buff Bagwell. Yeah, for sure. So Buff Bagwell was like kind of an early member of NWO, and he always just kind of looked like was in the background posing and stuff. And I don't remember many of his actual matches because I thought he was almost like a side jobber, jabroni kind of NWO member. But this documentary or this show, Dark Side of the Ring, about him made him seem to be a little bit more popular than I remembered him being, which is fine. That's cool. Good for him. But it goes into his whole drug addictions, of course. He's recovered. He's in recovery now. He's not recovered. And how his mom, his parents, his dad was like a drag racer, NHRA drag racer. He was a champion. And his mom was basically the boss of this lumberyard that their family owned. So they were pretty well off at the time. And they started losing money. And his mom became his manager in the wrestling thing, and she was actually a character that they said at first it was kind of a funny character, and then it went on too long. The gimmick went on too long.
I thought you were going to tie the two together and say his mom became a juggalo and birthed Violent J.
Her name was actually Judy, so she could have been Violent Judy.
Oh, see?
But yeah, it was interesting. It was a good one. It was a good one. And then, I watched the Razor Ramon one.
Violent Judy over by the copy maker.
Is that your Rob Schneider crossover?
No, but I like the idea of Violent Judy just having like a desk job and sitting by the Xerox machine. Yeah.
Making copies.
Full makeup. Whoop, whoop.
It was a good documentary. If you check out the show notes, as I mentioned before, we put all the stuff we talk about in the show notes. So there's going to be links to this. It might be affiliate links. And if you click them, we might get a penny off of your $1 zillion purchase on Amazon.
Yeah. Razor Ramon.
Razor Ramon. Hey, Chico.
I got to say, this episode this one was on the A&E biography of it. This might be in my opinion, the best one they've done so far. Like, they did a really good job of covering pretty much his whole life. And I'll be honest, like, maybe I'm a bad wrestling fan. That's very probable. I didn't know he killed a dude until I watched this.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. I mean, I knew about most of the wrestling stuff that they talked about. I didn't know much about him pre Razor Ramon, but yeah, I mean, I could see him being the Tom Selleck kind of knockoff.
He looks like a buffed up porn star, and like before
he was
became
so big. He was so big, and he slimmed down, and he was still a huge dude. I mean, he was like what 6'4", 6'5", or something. He was a big guy.
Yeah, and it's funny. Like next to was a Triple H, he still looked relatively small, but yeah, he was bigger than Hulk.
Well, even next to Kevin Nash. Kevin Nash is tall. He's like 6'7", and Kevin Nash still looked huge because he was, but
sure.
Scott Hall didn't look nearly Razor Ramon, aka Scott Hall, which is his actual name, didn't look nearly as big as Kevin Nash, and they were only a few inches apart. But I thought that was really cool that they had his brothers on there who looked nothing like him at all.
God, no. Yeah.
And it was a really kind of human story. You kind of went through all the ups and downs of his life, and he's a much more interesting and introspective person than I think I would expect.
Sergeant Slaughter.
Yeah. Oh my God. Compared to that Sergeant Slaughter, that Sergeant Slaughter one is probably, in my opinion,
it might be the worst of all.
It's the worst of the entire series.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree.
But no, they bounced back big with Razor. Like that one, like I said, I found myself actually drawn into it. And when I got interrupted with 15 minutes to go, I found myself in my head like, please shut up so I can watch for 15 minutes so I can watch the end of this.
Please go away. Please go away. Please go away.
Yeah, it's not usually how it happens. But
yeah, that was really good. I really enjoyed it. I really liked. I had seen the Jake the Snake, or not Jake the Snake. I had seen the DDP stuff because Diamond Dallas Page has developed this, DDP yoga thing, and he's rescued a lot of like on the brink wrestlers who were just always seemed to be on the edge of suicide and brought them back. That's in that Dark Side of the Ring with Buff Bagwell. They have DDPs on there because he rescued. I think Scotty Riggs was Marcus Bagwell's tag team partner for a while. American Males. So that he's just got his fingers in all that stuff.
Whenever they do his episode, that should be a good one too.
That's the new Legends episode is DDP.
Oh, is that is that this week? Okay. Well, that gives me something to watch.
Yeah. I read that book, that WCW Nitro book that was like 700 pages about the WCW versus WWE, which I didn't even finish the book because it just took forever. I know a lot about DDP's kind of career before he became a big star in WCW, but I'm looking forward to seeing this episode to see what it's all about.
Well, good. I haven't even looked at that yet, but that's good. That will give me something to watch going forward here. What else is in Wrestler's Corner this week? Is that all that you...
I watched some random assorted YouTube stuff that's not really...
Street fights?
Not really, street... No, it's not a street fight, but I watched a bunch of that stuff, and I don't even remember what half of it was, because I feel like YouTube is so just disposable, the stuff that you watch, so I couldn't even remember most of it that I watched.
I find that with YouTube, like, since I've gone cableless, like I don't have a cable box or anything anymore, like a lot of time where I'm would have been just kind of leaving on reruns of whatever, like Parks and Rec or whatever's on TNT that night. I'm just kind of logging into YouTube and it's just kind of rattling off a bunch of crap that I might or might not even really be watching. I'm like, this is probably something I could do better at, but sometimes I don't, because we don't always want to think.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, anything else you want to add before I ramble?
No, please ramble on.
So most of my stuff this week has been a little bit of rewatching. So I did watch Leprechaun 3 following our Leprechaun 1. I skipped 2 because I don't remember much about that, so I assume it must be trash. Leprechaun 3 is also trash, but it's a different kind of trash. It's the kind of trash that generally we're at least okay with. But I said this to you at our Franks and Steins night, that this franchise is fun because they just said, fuck it, those rails over there, we're staying off them the whole ride. and this movie kind of goes along with that. There's a character in it who's like the male lead, who I forgot how fucking obnoxious he is, but thankfully the movie's ridiculous enough that you just kind of get past that kind of quickly. But yeah, if you somehow haven't seen Leprechaun 3, like it's worth watching, I guess. I put on Night Feeder, which was a turd that I found on Tubi, and it is a straight fucking turd. I only made it about halfway through it, and nothing happened. Like, nothing. It was literally people sitting around in what looked like a schoolhouse just bullshitting. And I was like, all right, I'm fucking over this, so don't waste your time with that. After I got done with Night Feeder, I switched over and watched Nightmare Sisters, which is a 80s Leanna Quigley sorority house type movie, so you can kind of guess where that goes. Does take about 40 minutes to get to anything, but right about that point, they take the 3 women characters, basically strip them down to their underwear and tie them up in what looks like an oversized basketball net. And then it's just like boobs from there on. It's you know, not the worst thing I've ever seen. And then the only other thing, I rewatched the movie Animal House, which I haven't watched in years at this point.
Oof.
Don't like it?
It's fine. I don't know. Animal House is like my go-to when people old enough to know better act like dickheads. Then that's like, oh, we're all Animal House up in here. Oh, you know, I don't know. That's just my go-to like analogy.
So I watched it because it pops up like randomly where people are like, oh, this movie's so fucking horrible. And they're talking about it from like a political correctness standpoint. And yeah, there's some stuff in it that I guess you could say you probably couldn't get away with now because no one has a sense of humor about anything anymore. But at the same time, I'm like, this isn't the worst thing that I've seen. I've seen just as bad and just as questionable shit come out in the last year. I don't know. Like, okay, are they womanizing in this? Absolutely. Is it something that is meant to be taken seriously? I don't think so. I mean, these characters are pretty dumb. The smartest character is still a fucking dumbass in this movie. So, you know, it's a stupid comedy movie. Like, I found myself still kind of sitting back and chuckling at it. And I understand that's kind of lowbrow, but I'm fine with that. Sometimes we need to lower the brow a little bit and just kind of take one across the forehead, right?
Yeah, and I don't think it's a bad movie. I mean, it's fine. I have a personal bias against it just because I know people that probably saw it when it was new and they're, you know, late 60s, 70s, and they act like when they're together with their, you know, adult friends and they act like idiots. Then I just think Animal House, like they're reliving Animal House as an adult, as a way too grown adult.
I get it. Yeah. I think it's partially for me because I have a soft spot for John Belushi. Him in pretty much anything, I'll at least give it attention. So, but, you know, such is life. That's pretty much all I got, though, because I spent most of this week just kind of rewatching the same movie over and over again in different formats, which might or might not be the title of this episode. Be funny if I watched something 5 times and wasn't what we were talking about, huh?
You watched 5 different cuts of Blade Runner this week. Good for you.
God, I don't think I have. When Blu-rays first came out, they did the big mega Blade Runner, like lube it up cut or whatever they called it.
Mm-hmm.
I have that. I don't think I've ever watched anything other than the theatrical. And there's all the discs sitting there just like, hey, you could watch this. I'm like, meh, or I could not. Great movie, but I don't feel the need to watch that. I probably won't watch that 5 times for the rest of my life, let alone 5 times in 1 week. But that's fine. We're not talking about blah, blah, blah. We're going to talk about Dawn of the Dead, which is coming up on its 45th anniversary and re-releasing. So we're kind of coinciding. So we're going to take a quick break and come back and talk some zombies. Do you have a soft spot for nostalgia and all things pop culture related? Then you need to check out Video Tasties on YouTube. You can find them at the You Run Podcast Network and also at youtube.com/@videotasties. Video Tasties features theatrical versus extended cut content, as well as retrospectives on TV shows, movies, video game reviews, and throwbacks. Basically, if it's anything from your past that you want to go back and relive, Video Tasties has a video for you that can let you do that.
And they're a member of the You Run Podcast Network. You can find them at yourunpodcast.com.
Part shapeshifter, part vampire. It's a monster. A vampire is a monster.
We need your help to finish Vampire.
We need you to give us money so that we can give a finger to bad movies.
Now more than ever, people want new flavors of movies. We want to see new perspectives, new points of view.
And if we can all join together and support films that we actually want to see, then maybe everyone can make a vampire one day.
We're talking about Dawn of the Dead, and we always start with a third-party review, and I had to refrain from reading this one review that kind of pissed me off because it's comparing Dawn of the Dead to Terrifier 2 in regards to gore and practical effects. And I was like, this is fucking dumb. Like, that's not even a valid comparison. Like, you can't compare a movie that's literally 40 years newer to a movie that was made in 1970. But anyway.
If this was a video podcast, you could have seen the look on my face and told which way I sway on that.
Yeah, it's dumb. This is also a review that's
my
pretty
face is
stupid.
not dumb.
Not your face is beautiful.
Oh.
Bruno has reviewed Dawn of the Dead over on Rotten Tomatoes. He gave this movie 3 out of 5 stars, and he says, he guess it's okay for an almost 45-year-old horror movie. Really confusing at times. People agitated, shouting at each other. Not very subtle. The end is also not really an end, but it has its charm. The catch-up special effects and cute makeup. The scenario is very, very thin, though. I chose this because this was written in 2021, so this would be after COVID. Did you not pay attention to anything that happened in the 12 months prior to you writing this review? Because this is kind of exactly how it, well, aside from the zombies and people eating each other, like the news reports, felt kind of very eerily similar to what we saw in 2020. But whatever, Bruno, you're a fucking moron. But I respect your opinion to your 3 out of 5 star rating. Sean, what is Dawn of the Dead all about?
All right, so if we head over to IMDb and we check it out, we'll read the storyline and the plot. First off, I want to say this got a 7.8 out of 10 on IMDb. This is currently ranked, I don't know why, 2938 out of XXX. It's up 375 spots. The storyline, we're going to say that's what this first thing is. Actually, it's the plot. It says, during an escalating zombie epidemic, 2 Philadelphia SWAT members, a traffic reporter, and his TV executive girlfriend seek refuge in a secluded shopping mall. And if we go down to the storyline, it says, care of Grant, that's Grant, 2 S's. The zombie apocalypse has hit Earth. 2 personnel from a TV station and 2 policemen set off in a helicopter to find a safe place to hide out. Their search leads them to a shopping mall where they manage to find a place that, while not zombie-free, is quite secure. So far, so good.
I mean, fair enough. You got to start somewhere with this. So where do we want to start? Do you want to start with cast on this? Because there's at least one guy that's kind of horror royalty and a lot of people that you would recognize. Well, some people would recognize on this.
Yeah, looking at the cast, I just wanted to kind of point out, I think 2 people to kind of point out from this movie. Number 1, of course, is Ken Foree. We've talked about him, I don't know, like 3 or 4 times, I think, so far
this year.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we've mentioned them all this year. I don't know if we mentioned anything else prior.
2024, the year of Ken Foree.
He deserves it. God damn it. And the other one I would say is Tom Savini, who he's been in. I think it's funny that we bring it up quite a bit with casting. A lot of movies that we watch, we bring up like, oh, this is their first, this is their only, this is their second. You know, they have very few credits, a lot of the people in these, because especially when we talk like crummy movie March stuff, which we just got past, or if we talk about movies that are just not great, generally they're first time actors or whatever. A lot of the cast of this movie, you know, Ken Foree, Tom Savini are 2 actors that have had several roles after this, but this was like, I think Tom Savini's second role. And I think it was Ken Foree's like 4th or something like that. So, and everybody else is pretty green, but I think it's pretty well acted. The thing that I wanted to mention also, just before we kind of get rolling, is you said you watched, is it 4? You watched 4 different cuts of this?
Yeah, I watched the extended cut, the theatrical cut, the Argento cut, and the extended Argento.
Okay. I watched the extended cut, the 2-hour, 19-minute version. That's the only one that I watched to prepare for this.
That's fine. I mean, realistically speaking, this movie's actually stupidly kind of hard to find. Like, this is one that is not on streaming anywhere. You're dealing with either being someone who had it on a different format, be it DVD or Blu-ray, was out on Blu-ray for a little bit, or you found it through other means, whichever that is. If you're looking for, and there are a bunch of cuts that are on YouTube as well. And I'm not even going to get into the purists. I want to argue about that. That's a whole different conversation for, frankly, a different podcast. And by that, I mean not this fucking podcast. The theatrical cut is the one that actually is the one that Romero preferred, the one that actually the slightly shorter version. When I forget what film festival it was, but they played the extended cut at some film festival, and they basically billed it as the director's cut. And I guess Romero wasn't thrilled about that because it's not how he meant it to be. But
he was the editor on the film.
Yes.
You know.
Well, he edited the 2 American cuts. The Argento edited the Italian version.
Sure.
Just to get it out of the way now, because I don't want to try to do point in comparison through the whole episode like it's silly. If you haven't seen both versions, the biggest difference in the Argento cut to I'm going to assume most people that are listening to this have seen the Romero cut, because that's by far the more prominent one, especially on this side of the globe. The biggest difference between the 2 cuts of the film is the Argento version really leaned into the Goblin score. Like, all the music is a huge part of this movie. It does a lot to set the tone in both versions of the film. The Argento cut uses so much more of this synth rock music. They call it rock music. I don't know that I would call it that, but whatever. It gives it almost this like superhero action type vibe. Whenever like they're running through the mall and like punching zombies in the face, you're hearing this like really high energy, crazy Goblin soundtrack that goes along with it, and it works. But when you do it in comparison to the Romero cut, you get these like almost Universal monster movie type scoring going on with it. It gives a lot of this like meandering like slog of a feel. It makes it really feel more dark and more grimy almost than what the Argento cut gets, where the Argento cut almost lightens the mood with it a little bit. And believe it or not, I don't like that with this movie. Like, I kind of like the dark, hopeless feeling that grows throughout this movie as they're kind of progressing from the start of this, where it looks pretty bleak to begin with, and then you have some peaks in there. But one thing about this movie is when shit goes bad, it goes bad fucking fast. Like, it's like, oh, okay, well, we're just gonna go clean up all the, oh shit, there's a whole bunch of things here that are going to kill us, or whatever. So that's really the biggest difference. The only other things that are different is the dock scene at the beginning of the movie is a little bit different. I think this might be in the extended cut too, but you see the actor that plays Rhodes in Day of the Dead on the dock to begin with. They don't call him Rhodes, so I don't know if it's technically the same character or just the same actor, but pick your internet fan theory on what you want to do with that. I think it's just the same actor, and they didn't really think that far, because that happened a lot with movies like this, where you would just see actors reused because he probably knew Romero or something. So that's a little bit different. Other than that, you're seeing a lot of the same type of scenes, but shot from different angles. So if Romero would use like camera A for his shot, Argento might use camera C or whatever, something like that. So you're seeing the same thing, different angle. Other than that, they're pretty much the same movie.
It is available, according to justwatch.com, to rent and to buy on Amazon. $3.99 to rent, $9.99 to buy, supposedly.
It's a pretty good price to buy.
I want to just start right from the very beginning, just to point out something. When this movie opens, and to mention, this is the follow-up to Night of the Living Dead. Dawn of the Dead is the second. Day of the Dead is the third. I don't really remember exactly what comes next.
Land of the Dead came after that, then Diary, then Survival, and then somewhere in the middle there you have like a million spin-offs, including a Snyder Cut, Anyway, we're not talking about those right now.
But this is not the first movie. This is not a standalone. There is a series. The thing that I love about the way that this movie starts is it starts with this fade in on this. You're at first, you're not really quite sure what it is, but it's red carpet on a wall. And then the title comes in and they're in a TV station. That first shot, because you're not quite sure the context of where they are, always trips me out when I haven't watched this in a while and I start watching it. I'm like, what are they showing here? And then they zoom out or whatever. And it's the carpet in this studio. And the movie starts off with them being in this TV studio, and they're basically broadcasting emergency messages or like what to do, where for people to go. And the whole first scene is just this whole TV station being in just chaos and people yelling at each other. They're having this real spirited conversation. They're swearing at each other. People are cutting in to the broadcast, and people in the...
Still finding time for bunny ears on the camera.
So I just think it's a really clever way. I mean, this was in 78. So it's a really clever way for this movie to start off. And do you know like what the time frame is supposed to be from night to dawn?
Not exactly. It's supposed to be pretty quick because you're dealing with a still spreading like virus at this point, or in fact, whatever it is. So they're still trying to figure out all the facts within everything like that. That's why everything's so panic and so chaotic in there. And I actually love that scene because it does a really good job of not only picking up where the last movie left off, but it also does a good job of, if you didn't see the first movie or if you didn't like the first movie, it plays really well as a standalone without having the requisite of Night of the Living Dead. It also does a really good job of giving you, because this is where you meet Flyboy and where you meet Francine in the movie. This are your two non-SWAT team main characters. And it does a good job of kind of building a little bit of what their relationship is, how they're able to get this helicopter, everything that you kind of need to know. It takes its time with it. It's not like a 5-minute scene. This is like probably a solid 10 minutes of, pandemonium in this newsroom, but it does a good effective job of making you feel like everything's kind of fucked and this is how people are dealing with it right now. It cuts over to this SWAT team scene where we meet Peter and Roger, who are SWAT agents, and it's questionable as far as like PC stuff is concerned, but we're not going to worry about that. But the thing that I like about this movie goes a long way before you even really see a zombie or anything. Like the body count skyrockets as soon as we get to this SWAT team, and that's where we start seeing all the like fucked up stuff. Like I think we get like 5 or 6 dead bodies before we even see a zombie in the movie. And then they get into the building and you kind of get an idea of like, you get the impression like, okay, there's zombies that are a problem, but the rest of the people in the world that haven't become zombies yet might be your bigger problem in this world that we're dealing with. And that's kind of a reoccurring theme throughout the movie too. But it does a really effective job of setting the stage for where the world's at in short order and who these characters are and why these characters kind of trust each other the way they do throughout the majority of this movie.
And there is a scene in the projects, that's where the SWAT whole confrontation takes place, that whenever I think of this movie, when I think about gore, when I think about practical effects, I always go back to the scene where the lady is yelling and the guy with the afro comes and bites her like right on the neck, like in the shoulder neck area, and tears that piece off. And it looks so it's jarring. It looks pretty realistic for being 70s practical effects. Always think of that. The other one that I always think about, and you and I off mic have traded, you've sent me the behind the scenes thing. We've talked about it before, the helicopter haircut where it cuts the top of the zombie's head off. And just the very top, though, like the skull cap. And it's for being a 70s movie, a late 70s movie, the practical effects are on point. I mean, there are some that are kind of, they're okay. But the super red blood of all the gore effects, of all the practical effects that involve some kind of injury or blood, always stick out in my mind. This movie is like the high watermark, as far as I'm concerned, for a lot of that stuff.
Well, I think it's a game changer for it. I mean, obviously there's other people that would have got there eventually or done it one way or another, but I think this movie kind of set the standard for what a splatter-filled gore movie can be. There's other stuff before this that's like gnarly and whatnot, but you're talking about a movie from the 70s where a lot of the stuff in the 70s was so much built on tension, and this movie does a great job of building tension too, but it wasn't just shock value at that point. Like your big horror movies from that decade would be like Texas Chainsaw, Halloween, which came out the same year as this, Black Christmas. I'm sure I'm forgetting a bunch. The Exorcist had a lot of like practical effects in it, but this movie this movie is famously not rated because of how much gore is in this movie. And they just decided, you know what, fuck it. Let's just release it as not rated and see how that goes. It worked out for this movie. It doesn't work out for most movies, but this movie, I can't think of a movie that really pushes practical effects the way this one did that predates it. I'm sure it's out there and I'm sure someone's going to tell me I'm wrong or I'm an idiot, and you're right, but I can't think of a better example of it before this movie came out.
So we go from the projects, we go from the TV studio, we start taking the helicopter, and the helicopter lands. That's where we see the zombie with a haircut. Eventually they settle on finding a mall. And it's weird because malls have been around for quite a while, but the way that they approach this mall, they're kind of like surprised that there's this thing that's this big, this mall that's this big. They end up landing on the roof of it, and they decide, after kind of scoping it out, casing the joint a little bit, that this might be a place where they can settle down for a little while. I don't think that they initially think that this is a place that they can stay long term, but after they kind of check it out and they see what the scenario is and that there's just a few hundred, maybe up to 100 different zombies in this place, that they can call this place their home for a little bit.
Yeah, they start thinking that it's just a place to kind of catch your breath, and then gradually decide, like, yeah, we're going to stay for really as long as they can throughout the movie. And that's kind of where the whole subplot of the commentary on consumerism comes in. Obviously I wasn't around in 78, but the way everything I've watched on this kind of gets the impression, I get the impression that malls like this, like big indoor shopping malls, were a fairly new thing at this point in the 70s. So they probably had been around, I would assume, at some point, but they weren't like they weren't like they were 20 years ago, where they were like every city had a shopping mall. At least that's the way that's explained from what I've heard with it. They're more like there was one, and people just went there in droves because that's all you had. Yeah, now they're just craters where people go and make abandoned video, TikToks or whatever.
Or they have like trampoline parks there, whatever.
Yeah, whatever. There's a lot of things in this mall too. Like, it's kind of fun. Like, they set up so many perfect stores to be able to make it like, no, this really is a very plausible place that you could hide for a long period of time in this event. Like, they have what looks like a grocery store of some sort in this mall. They have a gun store, which the gun store is not actually in the mall, but for the purpose of the movie, it's in the mall. Basically, they have everything you really need. And the whole premise of why they chose this location is, before they even shot the movie, they told Romero that this place was like built to be like a bomb shelter or whatever, like it could survive a nuclear blast or some shit. So he kind of spun that into, well, zombies, and that's why they picked this mall and kind of fortified it the way they did. I like the way they kind of secure it. That's one of the more entertaining parts of the whole movie, is them kind of running around and figuring out their game plan, figuring out how they're going to get, what they need out of the mall to begin with. And then they decide, we're just going to take this mall. How they go about securing the doors is really entertaining. That's where you see them start to kind of succumb to zombies because they get cocky. Are we spoiling this movie? I mean, it's only 45 years old, right? We can kind of get into some of it.
I think it's fair game. Yeah.
I would have liked to seen how they got the third truck to block the door, because they tell you, they basically take the helicopter over to some truck yard, which is in close proximity to the mall. And they're going to use these big semi trucks to block the doors in front of the shopping mall so that zombies can't just wander in there and do their zombie shopping. In the process, Roger is making racket like crazy and just hooting, hollering and whatnot, and eventually he gets bit in the ass by a zombie in the leg. And they're telling you this as they had just moved the second truck, and they said they had one more to move. They said there's 3 main entrances that they have to block off. So Roger is tourniqueting himself, and he's all fucked up, and it's fine. His leg's in a really awkward position that every time I watch this movie, I was like, I don't understand how his leg is it looks like they detached his leg and like propped it up awkwardly in this truck. But whatever. They tell you that there's 3. You only see them block 2 entrances. So I would have liked to have seen in one of these, 5 cuts or whatever that I've watched, how they actually block the third door. Because basically, once Roger gets bit, he can't walk for the rest of the movie. He's like pushed around in a wheelbarrow and stuff. So it would have been kind of fun to see him torture himself a little bit to do that. But it doesn't really affect the movie all that much.
And I like that they explain that they can kind of run this place. It's nuclear powered. It's a nuclear powered mall. It's like, oh, infinite energy. Don't have to worry about that. There we go. Knock that one out.
Well, contrary to some of the Rotten Tomato reviews, I actually think we have 4 fairly smart characters in this that make most of their decisions. Like, okay, yes, there's some plot armor in this. Some of the dialogue is a little, well, let's be fair, it's a little 1970s low budget horror movie in some spots.
Fat City, brother. How are we going to work it?
Exactly. Most of the things that they do, they explain what they're doing, why they're doing it, and they make a plan that actually makes sense to execute. Even the simple things, like after they take over the mall and Peter wants to wall off the doorway to where they're hiding, it's like, that's a really smart thing for someone to say that makes complete sense. And in so many movies like this, like the remake, for example, it's just like an afterthought. No one ever even thinks to do anything like that because there's no depth to the characters outside of that. This movie does do a good job of making these characters all relatable and for the most part intelligent. They all have moments of dumbassery. Well, maybe not Peter, but the other three all have moments of dumbassery. Roger turns into the loose cannon and gets bit. Flyboy can't shoot for shit and runs like an idiot.
And he fucks up when the bandits come.
Yeah, that too. And then Francine's fine. This is not a character flaw, but she's pregnant, so she spends a lot of time being the
damsel in distress kind of character.
Well, I think she's the surrogate for a calendar in a lot of ways. You can tell how long they're in this mall based off how pregnant she looks, is a lot of what I got out of it. And they say she's 3-4 weeks along at the beginning of the movie, and then by the end of it, she's showing quite a bit.
Yeah, but I feel like that is just kind of like she's not showing, and then instantly they change her clothes and she's showing. It's like, oh, okay, well, she wasn't.
Yeah, for sure.
Didn't seem like an issue, at least showing.
I think that's the point of why it's in there, though, is to try to give some kind of idea of how long they're sitting in this mall.
That makes sense. Yeah.
The bikers show up. And it's a way that you could do it that, you don't have to have any dialogue. Like, we've been here for 4 months. You can kind of show a progression of the character like that.
I'm tired of eating Genoa salami for the past 3 months.
I don't know. That doesn't sound like the worst way to spend the apocalypse.
That's true. I mean, it could be worse.
The other thing that's great about this movie, too, is it has all these bleak moments, but it also breaks it up with genuinely goofy satirical moments in it. And it shows these characters kind of cutting loose a little bit, kind of having fun, kind of bonding as, I don't want to call them a family, but they're kind of all they got at this point. So there's a good 5-minute montage of them just dicking off in the mall, which is fairly entertaining for what it is. It does make you like these characters more.
And they do get to the point where they have cleared out the zombies, and it's kind of zombie free for, a considerable
good chunk of the
movie. So you're like, oh, okay, well, we see that they're just kind of walking through, they're doing their shopping, oh, I like these whatever clothes that I've seen 500 times that I was in a rush to run by because I was
here's my Ken 4A bag size bag of coffee.
Yeah. Yeah. Grinding all the coffee and all that stuff. I think this movie, for being 2 hours at the just regular cut, I think it's 2 hours and 9 minutes or something. The pacing is really good. I watched it this time and watched the extended cut, and it's a 2 hour and 19 cut. And it's watching through it, it actually went by really quickly. It always seems like it's a very quick slide to the end once Tom Savini and the bikers, the bandits show up. But I was kind of like, okay, when is that going to happen? Because again, seeing 10 extra minutes that I hadn't seen, and then, when is that going to happen? When does that happen again? And then it happens, and it really happens. It goes downhill very quickly from the point that all those bikers show up.
Yeah, and I think that's done better in the Romero cut. Truthfully, the Argento cut, I'm sure this is probably just a preference thing. Because it's so much high octane goblin music, it's almost like a quote on its own that should be on there. But there's so much of that, after the first hour of it, you're like, yeah, let's move. It doesn't have any break in that, where the Romero cut does a good job of kind of speeding you up, bringing you up and bringing you down on a consistent basis. So it takes you through different emotions throughout the whole, or different moods throughout the whole movie. And it does pace really well. And it's kind of just when you think it's starting to get well, what are they going to do? Are they just going to live in this mall forever? All of a sudden, here's Tom Savini, with his switchblade combing his mustache, and
right,
shit gets bad real quick. So I think that's one of the more genius things about this. If you can make a 2 hour movie not feel like a 2 hour movie, you're doing something right. So we've kind of hinted on. So eventually, Tom Savini and his gang of pagan bikers, yes, the actual pagan bikers, they're off in the distance, and they see the helicopter on top of the mall. They realize that someone's in there, and essentially they decide that they're going to take the mall. They kind of present it as they give them a choice that you can either share or we're going to take it. I kind of got the impression they're taking it no matter what you do, which is kind of what Peter anyway comes to figure out.
Yeah, he knows that they're there not necessarily to take over, to take up residence, because they're just kind of a nomadic army at that point, but more so that you got a bunch of cool shit and we need a bunch of cool shit, so we're going to take your cool shit.
I do think the shit that they take is kind of borderline ridiculous to the point where it almost takes you out. The zombie pie fight always felt a little
yeah, smashing banana cream pies and zombies' faces and stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, but it's also kind of that takes you. If you just left that out, I feel like that's 20 seconds that you could have left out of the movie, and I would have been okay with that. Maybe have it be a deleted scene or something. But I like that they're kind of running around, they're stealing TVs and shit, and then they're like, hey, what are you going to watch? He's like, I don't know. So he just starts smashing shit with the sledgehammer. Yeah, I guess. Smashing stuff is fun, but I don't really see how that helps with your Raider Nomad biker mission, but whatever.
I don't understand why they took a bunch of money, like cash.
I get that, because they do that. I mean, it's... People are dumb, and
I guess society hasn't totally fallen. Maybe cash is worth something. I could see the jewelry and the ammo from the gun store, and maybe clothes because you need clothes or whatever. But that was the thing. Like they're throwing, and they don't actually
underwear.
They don't prioritize the money that much.
No, but I think it's like anything else. You're right. Society hasn't totally fallen, but as long as you're in America, if you present someone with a wad of cash, you're going to have their attention more than likely, unless they're smart. And let's be real, like there's not a lot of smart Americans out there. Or not as many of them as there should be.
Send all complaints to.
Yeah, you can do that. That's fine. Again, the bikers show up. This is where you get to see Tom Savini as an actor, not just as a makeup effect artist. And he kind of plays a biker piece of shit pretty good in this. Like you definitely pay attention to him. Like he's noticeable and he sticks out compared to everyone else that's on screen at the time. I don't know if he's implied to be their leader or not, but he kind of comes off that way. And his demise is pretty entertaining as well when he does this like backward somersault flip into the fountain,
shallow fountain.
Yeah, but the end of this movie is basically just a commentary on consumerism and greed. Is, you know, Flyboy gets pissed off that the bikers are running over his mall and taking his shit. He shoots one of them in a very stupid place, and by stupid place I mean where he is. He's like right in the middle of everyone's view and just starts opening fire. Like, yeah, you're gonna get seen for sure. Peter tells him to stop until they shoot at him, and then he declares war on the bikers because that's going to work. And yeah, it basically just goes downhill quick. You get Flyboy turns into one of the more memorable zombies ever put to film, and this movie does a really good job of having a lot of zombies that are quite memorable to look at. And we're kind of left at the end with half of our characters dead and the other half kind of unknown. So the original ending was supposed to be that the two of them just kill themselves. And they changed it to this less dark ending, I guess, where they essentially get away in the helicopter to question, you know, presumably for the next movie, but they're not in the next movie. So we never really find out what ultimately happens to the two of them in that spot. For me, I've never seen that as a negative. I've heard people say that it ends really, you know, poorly because we don't have a closing on it. I don't have a problem with it. I kind of like the ambiguous part of how this movie ends. Thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree. I like movies. Well, I've mentioned it several times. I like when the heroes die. That would have been fine for me. But kind of the ambiguousness of it and not having closure. I mean, we've seen what we need to see. I don't, you know, I've heard a lot of the consumerism, the points that the movie, or the principles, I guess, that the movie is trying to push. I agree, but it feels like it's not heavy-handed. I mean, you know, it's as unheavy-handed, it's as light-handed as it could possibly be in a movie that takes place in a mall in the late 70s and everything's revolving around materialism. So I do see the commentary, but I feel like you can watch this movie and enjoy it for what it is and not feel like you're getting beat over the head with this like deep message in a horror movie, for shit's sake, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, this is not an A24.
Can I ask you about one of the zombies here? Or not one of the zombies, but one of the bikers?
Yes, I was going to ask you about the zombies, but go ahead.
Well,
bikers.
There's I don't know if it's just the extended cut, the guy with the sombrero on, he is infatuated with the high blood pressure, the blood pressure cuff machine.
It's in both cuts. Yeah.
What's the deal? What is supposed to be the deal with that? He like risks his life and ultimately becomes zombie food so that he can get his blood pressure measured. I
don't know what the reasoning behind him doing that is. I think it's funny that it's made it to every cut of the film because it's so ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't have a good answer for you as to, I know when they shot that, it's not really entirely scripted. Like there's a loose, obviously what Sweeney does has a script on it, but all the biker guys, like I said, they're the local pagan chapter of the Pittsburgh Pagans at the time, mixed with a bunch of militia guys and army guys and National Guard dudes. That's who's running around and doing all that stuff. There's a bunch of shit. Like there was a bar in the mall, like an actual operating bar. And I guess some of the zombies would just go and get drunk and broke a bunch of shit in the mall that they ended up having to fix, which is kind of fun. But as far as I know, when all hell breaks loose in that scene, most of what's going on, they just told him go loot the mall, basically, is what they told him to do. And that's kind of what happened for whatever reason. To my knowledge, and again, could be wrong. I've never read a script of this or anything. I love this movie, but not that extent. That was just something that happened, and it somehow made it to the film.
I was just curious.
So-
It's so ridiculous. It was like, there has to be
Yeah.
some background on why this guy's infatuated with this blood pressure machine.
I don't know. So we mentioned the zombies. Zombies, this is a zombie movie. There are several in this movie.
Really?
Yes, one or two. One thing that people tend to be critical of is the way the zombies look in this movie. And Savini said, like, he tried to paint them gray. The way the camera captured it, they came out kind of blue. Doesn't like it, whatever. I really don't have a problem with the colors so much because it's one of those things. I have newsflash for you. Zombies aren't real. So even if they were intended to be blue, I just kind of got over it. But how do you feel about the look of the zombies? Because I have an opinion on this compared to how zombies generally look now. Like, do you have any opinion on the zombies as a whole? I know I'm not talking about specific ones, just what you see as the zombie hordes throughout this movie.
No, I think like you, I just kind of learned to accept that they're supposed to be zombies, and at least they're all consistent. They're not like some of them. I mean, there are a few that have like prosthetics or something on their face, but for a large majority of them are just regular looking people that happen to be painted this pale kind of grayish blue color, but they're all that color. Even, the different skin toned people look some kind of shade of this blue, and there's not like a purple one running around and like a green one. You know what I'm saying? They're all kind of consistent, but I don't really have an opinion. They are there to represent zombies, and I believe that's what they are, and didn't really hear much of the criticism on the fact that they are blue until probably
Recently.
within the last 20 years or whatever.
So the colors a whole, like, I think I would have preferred them to come out the way that Savini intended, being more gray, but the blue doesn't really, or bluish color doesn't really distract me. But I kind of like how these zombies really kind of have like a personality to them in a lot of ways. Like, you see a lot, like there's a Hare Krishna zombie, which I don't even know if Hare Krishna still exists in the world. They probably do, but I'm not sure. Like, when you look at like The Walking Dead, or you look at the remake of this movie, or a lot of newer zombie movies, they all look like they just rolled in shit and got a bunch of like angry pimples and occasionally slashes on their face or some shit like that. They all look very the same. There's not a lot of differentiating one zombie from another zombie. Where with this, I like that you can almost look through this, and granted, you're looking at 1978 America, but you're seeing a whole different, like, it lends to why these characters are so tormented by this, especially at the beginning of the movie, because it looks like you're literally shooting down your neighbors. You're literally shooting down, people that were your family, and it kind of gives more reasoning to like why people are so fucked up by this. Where with some of the new ones, where they make them more prosthetic based and more monsters, really, or more monster looking, it's like way easier to separate the zombies from the human side of them, or what they once were. I think this almost makes them more creepy because they look like humans that just drank too much one night and woke up as a zombie or something. I didn't really notice that until I watched it this week.
And I think the other thing is that with this following up Night of the Living Dead, this is a new thing. It's a new outbreak. It's a new pandemic or whatnot. And modern zombies have that kind of look, like they're emaciated, like they've gone without food or, something like that. Whereas this is all fresh. A lot of these are fresh corpses that have just been killed, I guess. I mean, obviously, there are some that may have come out of the ground or whatnot, but a lot of these are probably supposed to be people who were very recently living. So they're not all emaciated and skinny and gaunt looking. They're more look like an average person, a real person that just happens to be shambling around and not quite a regular skin color.
Face. So this is a movie that I could literally go on about forever, but I won't bore people with it. Do you have anything you want to hit on before we start kind of wrapping up on this one? Because this could easily turn into a very long episode if you don't shut me up.
Well, the thing I wanted to ask you is, what was your first experience with this movie? Can you remember your first experience, how you learned about the movie and how you kind of found it and discovered it, and what your thoughts were initially, or what you can remember your first thoughts being?
I know I found it in the video store. It was it wasn't the original box with Roger on the cover and the like 3 phases of Roger and the Moon. It was the purple and orange box. So I remember that clearly. I know I rented it. I watched it in wasn't like a basement. It was like tri-level house, so like the lower level, and freaked myself out and instantly fell in love with the movie. I don't have any grand story with it, like I wasn't with friends or anything like that. I was pretty young though. I was probably like somewhere between 10 and 12 when I first watched this movie. And I initially fell in love with it because of the gore. That's what really made me like the movie. Is like, it has so much like crazy shit happening all the time. I really like the head explosion at the beginning of the movie. It's one of the better head explosions from the 70s and the 80s for that matter. I like the look of, I thought the bikers looked cool in this. I thought the just the concept of the mall being this like grand fortress of solitude against like zombies, it really worked. And I was a dirtbag like suburban kid who hung around malls a lot. So I, go to the local mall and be like, we don't have a gun store. We're kind of fucked if we have zombies here. So, or we don't have a gun store anymore. That type of thing. So that's most of what I remember from it. I found this before I got into, I think the only things I was really watching before this was like some of the Evil Dead stuff. Like I know I found those before this, but this is one of the movies that really got me into, when you walk down the horror aisle, if it looks cool, just fucking rent. Like didn't always work out so well. Like obviously this one for me stands above a lot of them, but it's one of those movies that kind of really ignited that. I don't know what I'm getting into, but this looks fucking weird. So I'm going to grab this and see how it goes. So I owe a lot of my horror fandom to this movie.
So I saw Night of the Living Dead first. I was probably like around the age you said you were when you watched this. I was like 10 to 12 in that area. And it was, I had moved when I was like 13. So I remember it was before that. And I don't think that I knew that there were sequels to Night of the Living Dead for a long time. And I remember, like you said, going to the video store, seeing the cover and seeing it said Dawn of the Dead, seeing Day of the Dead, but not really seeing it was George Romero, but not necessarily putting together 2 and 2 saying, oh yeah, this must be the sequel to this must be the sequel to this thing. And I don't think I saw any of these sequels, Dawn or Day, until probably college. And then what we would do is we just go down to the local video store and rent a couple movies for the weekend, watch them, return them next weekend, do the same thing, maybe even throughout the week. And I remember seeing this one and thinking it was just a really great idea of them running through this mall. It'd be the perfect place to kind of set up shop if something like this happened. You have, especially this mall, because they seem like they have everything that you would want. And just really remember the running from store to store and just having that fully stocked situation. They could do whatever they wanted, and really loving the idea, thinking this is an awesome idea for a movie like this. There's always that existential threat of the zombies being just outside. So there's always that creepy factor where they're always watching you, but feeling that safety until there just is none, and thought, this is a really cool concept. This is a really cool idea. There needs to be more movies like this. Still think that, but
yeah, well, I don't think we're going to get many movies like this anymore. I honestly think this movie is a product of the 70s in a lot of ways. And by that, I mean, we saw so many landmark movies and so many like subgenres in horror in the 70s. And I mean, we'll get to my opinion about it in just a second, but I think most horror fanatics have that one movie in there from this decade that just stands above all the rest. And there's a reason for that. And there's, we don't get these groundbreaking things that manage to reinvent their own genre while defining it at the same time anymore. Like we haven't had that. I'd say we haven't had that since Scream. And that's honestly, Wes Craven had a way of doing that multiple times that I don't think any other director did, including, go ahead and call me out on this, including, John Carpenter, including George Romero, including even Kubrick to an extent, like some of the other greatest filmmakers out there. I don't think they really redefined the genre the way that movies did in the 70s. And that's something, Wes Craven's the only guy that comes to mind that did that consistently after the 70s. But this movie is, like I said, it's one of those special movies because well, let's just go into it now because we're getting into hot dog territory here anyway. So
you're in for a big treat, bro, because it's hot dog time.
It's hot dog time, John.
Okay. So I've already kind of started rambling, so I'll go into it. So this movie is very much so just like, it's a pinnacle movie for me. It's a movie when someone says, what is a good horror movie, and just leaves it at that statement, this is a movie that I'm pointing to. I love that it's dark and drab. It manages to be a grueling, punishing movie in a lot of ways, but it also has great moments of levity in it and humor in it. Your 4 main characters are all characters that you like them the first time you watch it, and if you're someone who rewatches movies, like I find myself liking each one of them more every time I watch it, even though I still go, fucking Flyboy, get the fuck out of the way, shit like that. Because there's still moments in it where this movie kind of goes away from a lot of the tropes of like stupid characters doing stupid things. And it's like, I get the impression sometimes you have panic characters that don't make the best decisions, but I don't get the impression that these are stupid characters at any point. Everything in this movie looks really good. I love the way that they use, while the emergency broadcasts are still going on, I love the way they use those to kind of fill in the blanks as to what's happening in the world and really kind of fill you in what these zombies are. If you somehow miss Night of the Living Dead, it's a really good way to kind of pick up the pieces and say, this is exactly what's happening. If somehow you haven't noticed that there are zombies walking around biting people and turning them into other zombies. It does a really good job of building tension and then kind of hitting the release valve at the right time to either give you a moment of action or a moment of humor or something like that. It looks fantastic. Even seeing it like on an older cut where it looks all grainy and whatnot, it looks great. And seeing it restored, it looks just as good. It's just a different flavor of vanilla, basically, or chocolate or strawberry, whatever your favorite ice cream flavor is.
Neapolitan.
This is, in my opinion, George Romero's masterpiece. I mean, you're always going to find people that say, I like day more or I like night more or whatever. That's fine. I think this is this is, in my opinion, the best zombie movie that will ever be made. And it is, in my opinion, my favorite horror movie that's been made. So I'm giving this a solid, I'm not even putting fancy stuff on it. This is a solid 10 fancy head exploding hot dogs out of 10. And I don't use that rating lightly, but I love this movie, and that's not changing anytime soon.
Yeah, I feel like Dawn of the Dead is the quintessential zombie movie. We've seen better effects, we've seen better zombie makeup, but I don't think we've seen anything that's been executed as well between the story, like you said, the characters, how smart they are, how fleshed out they are, how they are actual characters, rather than just tropes or profiles of something resembling a person. And on top of that, how much fun this entire thing is. The message, like we mentioned before, isn't heavy-handed. It's the perfect scenario if you were ever caught in a situation like this, I think. If you were ever in a zombie apocalypse, and especially in the late 70s, early 80s, and there was a mall nearby, you'd be damn sure that's where I'm going. I got to give Dawn of the Dead, I'm going to say I'm going to suspend the normal 11 hot dog scale. I'm going to give it 9 helicopter haircuts out of 10 hot dogs. Almost said 11, but yeah, it's up there. It's one of my favorite. It is not one of my favorite. It is my favorite zombie movie. It's my favorite movie of this genre.
So yeah, we like this movie. Little bit. This is one that's kind of been a bucket list one for me. I kind of figured we would never talk about it because I like it too much.
Well, I think the thing that you said that I always find interesting and kind of humorous is these are the movies we want to work up towards talking about. And we feel if we bring up too many of these movies, we feel like we're not going to have anything else kind of in our quiver to come back to. But because of that 45th anniversary, wanted to touch on it.
It's more so, it's not that we won't have anything to go back to, but we can only talk about so many fat guy goes nutsoids before these two fat guys go nutsoids. Every now and then we have to watch a good movie. And realistically, there's a lot more bad movies out there than there are good movies. I say bad as a term of endearment.
Of course.
We don't want to blow our wad on all these A-tier titles and then have it all of a sudden be like, well, you haven't talked about anything that anyone's seen in the last year. Like, nope, that's not what we do anymore. So it's all fucking bygone trauma movies now. So with that in mind, talking about other crap, we are going to go to you, our loving and sometimes vengeful audience. And our question of the week this week is, what is your favorite zombie in any film? So just one zombie. You can do 2 if you want. You can do 3. I don't care. What are some of your favorite or more memorable zombies that you've seen in a film? I wanted to do this mostly because this movie has memorable zombies. I was just saying, I don't see that. Like when I think about newer zombie movies, there's plenty that are good, but I don't remember a lot of the zombies in particular other than like, well, that guy got blowed up or something. Like they don't feel like a character so much as they are like a set piece half the time, where I feel like they're more characters. But our friends over at Vampire Movie answered on Instagram. You can check them out at Vampire Movie, or you can go check out their Indiegogo, which you probably heard an ad about in this. They talked about it earlier. Should be there. They said Zombie Bill Murray from Zombieland. It's a good choice, even though he's not a zombie. He's dressed up like a zombie, but he's still pretty funny in that movie.
Technicalities.
Yeah. We didn't get any answers on Facebook or on Threads, but you can follow them there. We post them there. So if you want to be different, that's a place you can answer. Switching over to X, we're going to start with Pearl, who is at HissyFaceX, and she said, I have two favorite zombies. One has to be the best bluish gray tits in all of zombie cinema, other than Trash from Return of the Living Dead, referring to Linnea Quigley. And then second would be Fulci's 1979 Zombie 2 with the underwater fist-fighting shark zombie guy, which that's two pretty strong answers, really. Like the zombie that fights a shark. Who's going to get mad about that? So Boomer over at Podcast in the Woods said, Julie from Return of the Living Dead 3 is my favorite and favorite of the franchise. She's the chick on the cover. For those who don't know, she's the, punk rock looking pointy face Freddy Krueger chick. Best way I can really describe it.
Accurate.
Our friends over at Dissect That Film stayed in the Romero universe and said Bub from Day of the Dead, which is a very strong answer. He's definitely a memorable zombie. And then Jacob, also at King Freak 1986, also said Bub from Day of the Dead. Luna, who is L_U_N_A13 on Twitter, she said Tarman, which I know you'd love Tarman. You said he was a weirdo. So those are the only answers we got this week. He's weird for sure. So
scary.
Sean, what is your favorite zombie that's been put on film?
Oh, all right. Well, if I got to talk about high level, like ones that people know, Tarman, of course, Bub. Got to be, Bub's got to be in that conversation. And just kind of side, non-speaking, non-named zombie characters in this movie that we talked about in Dawn of the Dead. My favorite zombie of just the regular run-of-the-mill zombies is that guy that's kind of balding that gets first caught on the escalator when they turn the escalator on. He's he's really like perplexed and he kind of stumbles around and he just appears in the background of all these shots. And I think he's in the raid at the end of the movie where they kind of raid the
he picks upstairs. The gun up and points it at his own face.
Yeah, he's just kind of like that guy. He reminds me of that guy in the Dave Chappelle skits where the guy would just spin around in the background doing the robot. Like that, he reminds me of that guy for some reason. Like that, that's what that guy as a zombie would do.
I have to give an honorable mention. We mentioned him already in this episode to the Hare Krishna zombie. I don't know how many Hare Krishnas were wandering around Pittsburgh back in 1978, but he always sticks out to me in this movie because one, his fucking tambourine is still going the whole time that he's wandering around. He's smart enough to be able to go upstairs, so that's good. And I've never seen another Hare Krishna zombie. The only other movie I can think of with Hare Krishnas in it was one of the Cheech and Chong movies. So I like that they, included him. I would say that Bill Murray and Trash are both excellent choices as well. But I want to give an honorable mention to Ed at the end of Shaun of the Dead because he's a lovable, dumb zombie that plays video games. And I kind of like that little twist. And it's cute how they ended that movie. They made him a zombie, but he's a pet.
He's a friend.
He is a friend. He's a friend till the end. Just like that little fucker.
Blood buddy.
Yeah, blood buddy. So, perfect. You got anything you want to tack on at the end of this? I feel like we're going long on this one.
No.
All right. Well, then we're not tacking anything else on. If you have somehow not seen this movie, please do yourself a favor and go watch it. It's a great movie. Again, we mentioned it is available on Amazon. You can watch it for free on YouTube. Just keep in mind that that's a YouTube cut. So it might not be 100%, but you'll get the idea. While you're watching it, you can also, respond to us. You can yell at us, tell us we're wrong, tell us we're right, whatever you want to do. But you can find us all over the internet at Dewey Pod Monster. Any social media site, we are available as just that. Search Dewey Pod Monster and you'll find us. You can find us and all the other shows that are on the You Run Podcast Network at yourunpodcast.com. You can also find all of our previous episodes there as well as on our site at crap.town. And Sean, tell me what I'm forgetting. What else are we doing? What else is going on?
If you want your answer the question of the week answered on this question of the week show, you can find us on all the social media networks at Dewey Pod Monster. Thanks again. Big thanks to everybody who is still continuing. It's been dying down a little bit. So if you could pick up answering the poll, put a lot of work into that. Just kidding. No, but we'd seriously answer the poll. Give us some feedback on our Spotify page. If you check out our show notes and you want to figure out how you can watch any of this crap that we talk about, it'll be linked there. If you click any of those links, some of them are affiliate links, believe it or not. And if you buy anything on Amazon or whatever the affiliate links are, we might get like a penny for every quadrillion dollars that you spend on Amazon. And if you want to follow any of my Michigan craft beer adventures, you can find me at youtube.drafttherapy.com or you can find me on social media networks at Draft Therapy.
All right. that's it. That's all we got. We'll talk to you next week.
Say goodbye, creep.